Well, it's Wednesday, day 3 of NaNoWriMo, and I'm actually doing pretty well right now. I'm doing way better than I have in other years, at least. I've been writing every day. I've been forcing myself into it, and it's turning out quite well. I'm actually liking the way the story is starting to shape up. It's really early yet, of course. I haven't even broken the 10,000 word mark, but I'm getting close, and I'm hoping that with some extra time on the weekend, I'm going to be doing even better. Hard to say, though. We'll see how it turns out. A few things I wanted to talk about. One was that there's something I realized in the early parts of writing the story. And it's something that most writers do know, at least the ones that really get into it. And that is that you have to let your story be your story. And what I mean by that is that you have to let it flow. Well, what happened was, in the early part of writing the story, I had a certain idea of how it was going to go. I had it planned out. I have an entire outline for the novel I'm writing, and characters and such, but I had it in my head, planned out, as a story that's done in third person. I was going to do all sorts of different character shifts, and I thought it would work out that way. But I found, while I was writing it, that I actually started to shift into first person without even noticing it. It was a really quick shift, too. I started in third person. I wrote about 1,000 words that way, and then I shifted into first person. And I caught it, and I'm like, oh, wow, I shouldn't be doing that. I want to write this in third person. And I went back and I changed it, and I kept writing. And for a while I kept it in third person again, and then it shifted back into first person. And I found that I was just way more comfortable writing the story in a first person perspective, from the perspective of the main character. And I think it's a better story for it now. It flows better because I'm more comfortable writing it that way. It makes a bit more sense with some of the descriptions I'm giving out, and it'll actually up some of the suspense in later parts of the story, the drama and the suspense and all the other things that I want to inject into this novel I'm writing. So the lesson I relearned in early parts of the National Novel Writing Month is that you have to let your story be your story. If it wants to come out a certain way, if it really wants to come out a certain way, don't fight it. Let it do that. Let it come out the way it wants to come out. Let it flow. Don't force. Because if you force it, you'll always be going back. You'll be correcting yourself. You'll be second-guessing yourself. And it'll hurt. It'll hurt the flow of your writing. Now, you can always correct stuff like that in editing, but you don't have to force it that way. Let it come. If you've got the inspiration to actually have something flowing, don't screw it up by trying to make it something it isn't. Lesson learned. So now my brilliant, well, not so brilliant, but my well-planned third-person story is shifting into an entirely different first-person story while I'm writing it. And I think it'll work out for the best. We'll see, of course. The month's not over yet. It's barely even begun, but we shall see. Now, I want to talk a bit also about the story I'm writing and the genesis of this story, the beginning of it. Well, not the beginning of the literal story, but the beginning of the idea for it. Now, getting an idea for a book, getting an idea for a long story, even a short story, can be difficult. You got to have inspiration. And inspiration can come in any number of forms. It can come when you decide one day to be like, okay, I want to write a book. What is this book about? Well, I want to write a book about, and then you look around and you do a line of sight, name gathering, and you're like, I want a book about cats who draw posters. Well, nifty. I just did a line of sight naming thing too. It's how you get crazy ideas like cats drawing posters. That's an inspiration. You can, of course, try to go for something way more awesome than cats drawing posters, although I don't know how. And you can sit there, and of course, if you don't have an inspiration to begin with, you're just going to go crazy without any idea of what to write. You need to have something to work with, one original spark of idea to build from. And once you get that, even then it's not easy, but for my story, the original spark of idea was actually a character, not a plot, not a message, not anything else, but a character I wanted to write for. And the character began off as a role-playing game character. Pen and paper, Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game character that I had created for just this one-off, one-shot game that I was in with a bunch of my friends. Except, when I started with her, I didn't even know what I was going to do with this character. And I played her, and it was actually really, really fun. And I started to get into the head of the character, as good role players tend to do. And started building her backstory, even though she wasn't going to exist for more than 8 hours or so. In playing her terms at least. But I really liked it. I really liked this character. And I wanted to do more with her. I really did. So I put her kind of on the back burner. I put her on the shelf, kept the ideas around, and started playing around with what kind of story I could write to showcase her. I just wanted to do something with her. And the story ideas I came up with, I didn't want to use her as a viewpoint character, because the way this particular character works is that she's supposed to be fairly mysterious and kind of inhuman in a lot of ways. Just a lot of the ways that she works. So I had to figure out a way to do that, and the story kind of started as partially started with this character. I wanted to showcase her, and it grew from that. Originally, she was a D&D character, but this story is not set in any sort of fantasy setting, so I had to shift things around, and I decided that the best way to showcase her was also in connection with this other idea that I had been kicking around in my head. This other idea being a kind of urban fantasy sort of story. I'm a big fan of the urban fantasy genre. It's one of my favorite genres, so obviously if I want to really do something nifty, I'm going to write in that particular genre. And I started with an idea with this character, and I had an idea for a story that included was urban fantasy, but really low on magic. Hello, cat. Why must you always be in my videos? I wanted to do a story that was urban fantasy, but without the kind of magic that you'd get in other urban fantasies. Normal urban fantasy, modern day setting, usually in a city. Magic is real. There's, all the fairy tale creatures are real. You go out. The main character is usually a hot, detective or police or something. She's some lady. Usually, most of the ones I've read are the main character is female. Sometimes they're male, it's true, but most of the time it's some good-looking lady with magical powers. Always with the magical powers. Who goes out, fights demons and vampires, lots of vampires too, lots and lots of vampires, and generally has a shit time of life because, you know, if you're living in an urban fantasy setting, you're not going to have the funnest of days, fighting vampires and werewolves and demons and whatnot. But I like that genre. I really do. I think it's lots of fun. I have tons of fun reading it. Even the bad ones, and there are really, really bad ones out there that I will still buy and read. And it lends itself to long series of books, which I will also buy and read. So I hope I am my contributions to the livelihood of authors out there in the world of urban fantasy is appreciated, because I spent a lot of money on them. But I wanted to do an urban fantasy story without the magic, where there is no, trolls living under every bridge, literally. Where there is no demons coming out of the woodwork and possessing people, and where there is no actual magic. Nobody throws fireballs. Nobody gets clairvoyant flashes, but it's still urban fantasy. And I had an idea of how to do this, and for some reason, the character that I really wanted to work with meshed very well with this idea of how to do an urban fantasy sans magic. And so that's how the idea for this story was born. Now, there's also a lot of other stuff that went on in the background, kind of connecting other things, but the genesis for this story was a character and a setting. And really, that's a very good start for a story. All I needed now was a plot.